Madeline Carter sat at the edge of the long mahogany dining table, her fork paused midair, untouched salad still crisp on her plate. Her family was toasting, again, to her older sister Victoria, whose face was flashing across the muted flat screen behind them. CNN's banner read, Bexar County's youngest DA breaks another record. "That's my girl," said Richard Carter, former San Antonio police chief, lifting his glass with unmistakable pride. His voice carried like a gavel in the ornate room, full of silver, old medals, and framed degrees. No one looked at Madeline. No one had asked about her recent graduation. She had crossed the stage with a bachelor's in humanities last week. No fanfare, no flowers. She hadn't even told them the date. She knew they wouldn't come. Margaret Carter, her mother, sat beside Richard with her rosary twisted tightly around her fingers. Victoria beamed. Perfect posture, navy dress ironed without a wrinkle, sipping her wine like the lead character in a Hallmark drama. Madeline, 23, quiet, layered in shadows of her own choosing, chewed the inside of her cheek. She wore no makeup, her hair slightly damp from a walk in the rain, her sketchbook tucked inside her backpack beneath the table. She never belonged here, not with this family that measured worth in headlines and handshakes. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down. 3 messages, 2 voicemails, from Sasha. Then came the text, Mads, you need to see this. Now. She excused herself to the hallway, fingers already trembling. The second message was a link. By the time it loaded, her lungs had collapsed in on themselves. It was her. On spring break, 2 years ago. A private moment. Her ex-boyfriend had filmed it without her knowing. He'd promised it was deleted. It wasn't. The video had been uploaded, face, voice, everything, tagged with her full name. Already climbing in views, already in forums, already out of her hands. She collapsed against the wall, breath shallow. She didn't even have time to cry. Victoria found it first. Madeline didn't know that until much later. But she was the one who sent it to their father with a single line. You need to act before this gets worse. Dinner never resumed. Richard's footsteps stormed down the hallway. His face, usually controlled, was aflame with rage. You think we raised you for this? He spat. For the internet to see you like a damn... I didn't post it, Madeline whispered, her voice cracking. I didn't even know he still... You violated the Carter name. He threw her university diploma onto her bed like a receipt he meant to return. You want to live like trash? Do it without my roof, without my name. Margaret stood behind him, silent, praying. She wouldn't even look Madeline in the eye. Madeline turned to Victoria, desperate. You sent it to him, she said, her voice tight. Victoria folded her arms. I protected the family. Madeline packed in silence, her sketchbooks, a change of clothes, the red backpack she'd had since freshman year. The room was bathed in twilight, the blinds slicing the air into cruel shapes. Richard stood by the front door, holding out her bank card like a severance check. Don't call, don't write. Margaret peeked from behind the curtain as Madeline stepped into the dusky heat. She didn't wave, didn't speak, just watched her daughter walk off the property like a stain being removed. The first week, Madeline couch-hopped. Then Sasha's kindness wore thin. By day 7, she was boarding a Greyhound north. No real destination. Just away. Denver. Or something quieter. Somewhere the Carter name meant nothing. The second night, she got off near a Santa Fe overpass. There, beneath the hum of truck engines and sodium lights, she pulled out her leather-bound childhood notebook. It had birthdays, home recipes, even the notes her mother used to leave in her lunchbox. Smile today. The world might need it. She tore every page, slowly, fed them one by one into a flame built with receipts and dry grass. It wasn't dramatic, just necessary. She whispered, They erased me. Fine, let's make it official. Denver was cold. The kind of cold that didn't just numb your skin, it seeped into the center of who you were. Madeline rented a tiny basement room from a woman who smoked menthols and had a cat named Nixon. She worked mornings at Red Line Diner, slinging pancakes and coffee for tech bros and night shift nurses. Afternoons were spent scrubbing examination room floors at a free clinic. No one talked. That was the beauty of it. Evenings, she keyed in freight data for a logistics startup. Her boss didn't know her last name. Her coworkers didn't ask. In the silence, she painted. Not always. Paint was expensive. But one night, after a particularly brutal shift where a woman called her white trash for dropping syrup, she took an old toothbrush, dipped it in dollar store acrylics, and painted a figure dissolving into shadow. She titled it, Owned Nothing. She hung it behind her curtain. No one saw it. That felt right. Madeline learned to disappear. But even in disappearance, purpose started to take root. At the clinic, she heard shouting one night, Spanish, fast, sharp. A young mother was being pressured by an officer to sign what looked like deportation papers. She didn't understand the form, or maybe she did, but fear paralyzed her. Madeline stepped forward. "She's not signing that," she said flatly. The officer blinked. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who knows that your software is outdated and those forms are invalid." A bluff. But it worked. The officer grumbled and left. The mother cried, clutching her child like a lifeline. That night, Madeline didn't sleep. The next day, she was summoned to a quiet office. She expected to be fired. Instead, a man with a gentle voice said, "You've got guts. We could use that." His name was Jordan Price, and that moment would be the first brick in a road she hadn't dared imagine. If you've ever been cast aside after doing your best, type 1, you're not alone. As Madeline closed the door of her new shared office 2 weeks later, she caught a glimpse of a news ticker running across a muted TV. Victoria Carter, named National Prosecutor of the Year. Below it, a headline blinked in slow rhythm. Video scandal reemerges. Sources say it was the sister. The email came at 6:11 a.m., right as Madeline set down a plate of waffles in front of a teenager glued to his phone. Subject, termination of remote access, effective immediately from Andrea.kinginovalogics.com. Hi, Maddie. Unfortunately, we've reassigned your role. We'll no longer need your data support. Best of luck moving forward. No greeting, no reason, just corporate finality in Arial 11PA. Her hands didn't shake, not outwardly. She simply stared at the screen of her cracked phone as syrup bled slowly across the teenager's plate. Andrea King. The same coworker she'd trained 6 months ago. The one who constantly asked Madeline to proof her reports real quick. The one who forgot her own login twice but somehow streamlined analytics last quarter. The one who copied Madeline's formatting, her wording, her structure, and then presented it to the CTO in a call Madeline wasn't even invited to. Now Andrea had her role, and the inbox didn't even bother to BCC. "Table 4's been waiting," her manager barked from across the counter. Madeline nodded, slid the plate forward, and wiped her hands on her apron. Her fingertips trembled now, not from emotion, but fatigue, the kind of exhaustion you don't sleep off. She closed the email. She didn't have time to fall apart. By the time her shift ended, her shoes were soaked from a burst mop bucket, and her tips totaled 12.38. She walked 3 blocks to the clinic where she scrubbed floors in silence. The building always smelled like bleach and grief. She liked it. It reminded her that some things could be cleaned. At 6:45 p.m., as the sun began to fall behind Denver's jagged skyline, Madeline passed by a hallway where a uniformed ICE officer stood over a weeping woman with a child. The woman didn't speak English. The officer didn't care. "It's already signed," he snapped. "Just hold the pen." Madeline paused, heart hammering. She stepped forward. "She's not signing that," she said firmly. The officer turned, annoyed. "Excuse me?" "I said, those papers are invalid. Your form's outdated, and you're harassing someone who doesn't understand her rights." The officer scoffed. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who knows the system better than you think." It was a lie, but it landed. He muttered something under his breath and walked away, papers flapping in the air like defeated flags. The woman stared at Madeline, eyes wide. She whispered, "Gracias." Madeline didn't respond. Not yet. Her body was still braced for backlash. The next morning, she was summoned into an upstairs office at the clinic. She expected to be fired. Instead, a man in a navy turtleneck sat across from her, reading a printed report. You stood up to ICE, he said without looking up. I didn't mean to cause trouble, she replied. That's not what I said. He closed the folder. I'm Jordan Price, director of Pro-Liberate. Madeline blinked. She'd heard of it, a nonprofit that helped undocumented families navigate impossible systems. Why are you still mopping floors? He asked. She stared. Because no one ever asks what else I can do. Jordan smiled. Then maybe it's time someone did. Madeline started at the bottom again. Coffee runs, filing, translating pamphlets in Google Docs and watching how meetings worked from the back row. But she watched everything. Who spoke? Who interrupted? Who really held power? She began redrafting outdated documents, then grant applications. She asked questions no one else dared to, like why the city contracts hadn't been renewed, or why refugee services had loopholes for domestic abuse cases. At night, she studied immigration law online. On Sundays, she painted, quietly, small canvases stacked behind her curtain, abstract shapes dissolving into white space. Once, Denise Harper, a senior advisor at Pro-Liberate, caught sight of one. You did this? She asked. Madeline shrugged. I needed somewhere to put what doesn't fit into policy briefs. Denise nodded. You ever think about leading instead of just reacting? Madeline smiled faintly. Only when no one's watching. But not everyone at the nonprofit was pleased. Andrea, the same Andrea from Nova Logics, had also joined Pro-Liberate's policy team recently. Rebranded now as a civic strategist. Madeline caught her once in the break room, holding a folder she hadn't authored. You presented the refugee housing data report? Madeline asked. Andrea looked up, lips twitching. You didn't claim authorship. I just cleaned it up. Madeline stared. You changed the stats. They were too heavy. I softened the framing. We can't scare donors. That's not your call. Andrea leaned in, her tone syrupy and smug. Don't act like you matter more here. You're just the girl who used to mop. That night, Madeline didn't sleep. Instead, she pulled out an old notebook, its pages still crisp. She began writing, proposals, speeches, ideas. But this time she signed them. Madeline Carter, no pen name, no initials. She was done being a ghost. 3 months later, Pro-Liberate won a $1.2 million grant to fund emergency housing for displaced migrant families. The proposal had been drafted by Madeline. She didn't make a speech, but when Jordan announced the win, he looked directly at her. People clapped. Andrea didn't. Outside the building that evening, Madeline stared at the Denver skyline as the wind pulled at her coat. She pulled out her phone and searched a name she hadn't typed in years. Victoria Carter, DA. The search bar filled in. Victoria Carter scandal? Victoria Carter sister leak? Who is Madeline Carter, really? The past was trying to chase her again, and this time it might know where to find her. If you've ever watched someone take credit for what nearly broke you to create, type 2. There's strength in naming what hurt you. The next morning, a journalist from the Rocky Mountain Chronicle waited outside Pro-Liberate. She smiled and held up a photo. Hi, you're Madeline Carter, right? The governor in waiting? She handed over a folder. Inside, a leaked email thread from 5 years ago. The subject line read, She was the one in the video. Madeline Carter's name was trending for the first time in 15 years, and it wasn't because of anything she said. She had said nothing, hadn't issued a press release, hadn't posted a tweet, hadn't granted a single interview. All she had done was walk into a courthouse in San Antonio, wearing a black coat and sunglasses, and sit silently in the last row of the gallery. Her sister Victoria Carter was on trial for evidence tampering in a federal immigration case. It was the kind of fall from grace most people only read about. But Madeline? She had lived through its inverse, from exile to power, from shadow to lawmaker. The moment she entered the courtroom, everything shifted. Judge Audrey Lane had paused, squinted toward the back, and asked aloud, Wait, is that Madeline Carter, the governor of Colorado? Every head snapped around. Reporters gasped. Flashes went off. Victoria's face, so practiced in poise, crumbled for just a breath. Madeline didn't speak. She didn't nod. She just sat, back straight, calm, as though she belonged to that room more than any of them did. And in a way, she did. By the time she returned to her Denver office, her inbox was a war zone. Media outlets begging for statements, cable networks offering primetime interviews, political advisors urging her to issue neutral remarks. Madeline, her chief of staff, said gently, "It's a good time to stay above the fray. Let the justice system work. This isn't your fight." She looked out the window. "It's not a fight," she said. "It's a reckoning." The next day, she held a press conference, not about her family, but about a new bill, the Justice Witness Protection Act, a law that would criminalize any attempt to manipulate whistleblowers, officials, or public figures through family threats, leaked pasts, or reputation coercion. She didn't name names, but she didn't have to. Everyone already knew. That evening, her phone rang. Caller ID, Richard Carter. Her father hadn't spoken to her in 15 years. She let it ring twice before answering. "Governor," he said coldly. The word tasted foreign on his tongue. "You're using our name for attention, dragging us through the dirt for votes." Madeline didn't flinch. "I didn't ask to be a Carter. I just refused to let you erase me." Silence. Breathing. "You could have called." "You told me not to." Click. He hung up. The text from her mother came 2 hours later. "We'd like to invite you to dinner, Friday. All of us will be there. Please come. No emojis, no sentiment, just please." Madeline stared at it for a long time, and against every instinct, she typed, "I'll come." Friday arrived with a sunset sharp as glass. The Carter family home hadn't changed. Lemon oil in the air, curtains drawn perfectly, furniture that dared you to breathe wrong. Her mother opened the door, mascara already smudged. "Madeline," she whispered. Her father stood behind her in a freshly ironed shirt, formal, cold. Victoria sat at the dining table, silent, turning a napkin over and over in her lap like a prayer bead. The chair reserved for Madeline had been reupholstered. New leather, fresh stitching, a cosmetic fix over old wood. Dinner was elaborate: enchiladas, arroz rojo, warm tortillas, a bottle of wine no one touched. They didn't talk about the indictment. They talked about childhood. "Remember when you used to draw on the backs of church bulletins?" Margaret said, voice falsely bright. "I saw one of your campaign posters," Richard offered. "Professional work." Madeline watched them carefully, like a scientist examining a petri dish of something once contagious. Finally, Victoria spoke. "I know I messed up," she said quietly. "I never thought it would go this far." Then came the pivot. "We were thinking—" Margaret reached across the table, then hesitated. "If you could maybe say a few words to the federal prosecutor. A character reference. Just something small. Informal." Madeline didn't move. She didn't blink. She placed her fork down slowly. The click echoed like a gavel. "If I weren't the governor," she asked, "would I still be your blood?" No one answered. The silence was deafening. She stood up. The leather on the chair squeaked under the sudden absence. "I kept your name," she said evenly, "but I built my life without you in it." She turned, coat brushing against the floor. Her mother whispered behind her, "Madeline, please." But she didn't stop. She didn't look back. The message came at 3:12 a.m. Her phone buzzed, then again, then a flood, screenshots, pixelated clips, old emails, private exchanges, a photo of her crying outside a Denver shelter during her first year there. No caption, no sender, just her past, repackaged for destruction. She stared at the screen in the dark. Her pulse was steady, not fear, calculation. At 9 a.m., her communications director slid a tablet across her desk. "Someone's trying to respin the old video leak story," she said, "but this time with a narrative that you're exploiting it for political gain." Madeline looked at the screen. A blog post read, "The real Madeline Carter, a scandal-turned strategy?" Her finger tapped the edge of her desk, slowly. Then a call came through. Discreet. A friend from the Justice Department. "You didn't hear this from me," he said quietly, "but your father's been asking around. Background checks, personal vetting, looking for leverage. Madeline closed her eyes for one long beat, then opened them, clear, cold, focused. This wasn't concern, it was a warning. If you've ever had someone come back, not to love you, but to use you, type 3. You're not alone, and you never were. That night, she opened her laptop and began drafting a second bill. Not a reaction, an armor. The Public Kinship Act. A law designed to protect people from being punished, professionally, politically, emotionally, for family ties they didn't choose to bleed for. She didn't need revenge. She needed legislation. The courier arrived at 7:42 a.m., unannounced. He handed Madeline a flat envelope, no return address, no insignia, just her name scrawled in handwriting she hadn't seen in decades. She opened it slowly, her breath already shallow, her fingers stiff. Inside, a printed affidavit, a sworn confession, signed 3 weeks ago by a retired courthouse clerk from Bezar County. Statement: evidence from an immigration trial had been deliberately altered under pressure from District Attorney Victoria Carter. There was more. A line scribbled beneath the signature, almost as an afterthought. You were right to leave. Madeline didn't flinch. She folded the document, slid it into a locked drawer, and walked toward the Capitol with a steady, mechanical calm. Today was not about vindication. It was about naming the tools that almost destroyed her, and making sure no one else bled quietly the way she had. At noon, Madeline Carter stood before the state legislature, alone at the podium, without a flag behind her, without a security detail. No campaign banner, no smile, just her, a white blazer, a black binder. Behind her, a wall of art pieces drawn by undocumented children whose parents had been protected by pro-liberate's emergency housing bill. She adjusted the mic. The room settled. We've all seen how power works, she began. It doesn't always come in the form of weapons or laws. Sometimes it comes in softer ways, like reminders of who your father is, like dinner invitations laced with demands. Silence rippled. Not tension, recognition. I'm not here to rewrite the past. I'm here to make sure it doesn't become someone else's future. She paused, then announced the bill she had written in the dark hours after her father's whispered threat and her sister's quiet plea. The Public Kinship Act. A law protecting public servants, whistleblowers, and officials from retaliation based on family ties, legacy coercion, or reputational hostage-taking. It made it illegal to weaponize bloodlines, past or present, against those who had rebuilt their lives without inherited privilege. She didn't name names, but she didn't need to. The room knew, the press knew, and the Carter family most of all. They knew. 3 hours later, the press exploded. Governor Carter draws the line between legacy and leverage, the law that names the wound. Blood isn't a bargaining chip. Carter's historic bill passes first vote. Former colleagues who once pitied her now praised her clarity. Editorials hailed her as the first official to legislate against generational abuse with surgical precision. That night, her phone rang. Caller ID, Margaret Carter. She let it ring 6 times, then picked up. Her mother's voice was a whisper. Your sister. She's scared, Madeline. She doesn't know where to go next. Madeline exhaled through her nose. She should have thought of that before manipulating court evidence. I know, Margaret said, her voice cracking. I hoped you'd say something. Help her. For me. I've said enough, Madeline replied, and everything I've said is on record. Click. She didn't wait for a goodbye. The next morning, Victoria showed up at Madeline's office. No appointment, no makeup, just jeans, a blouse, and eyes swollen from exhaustion. Madeline didn't stand. Victoria sat slowly, her hands folded like she didn't trust them. I'm not here to ask for help, she said. I just wanted you to know. I remember everything now. Madeline tilted her head. Everything? Victoria nodded. The day Dad changed the locks, the night you burned those old papers, the dinner where I watched you walk out. I remember staying quiet and feeling powerful for it. Madeline didn't speak. Victoria's voice trembled. I told myself you were weak. But really, I was just afraid that if you became something without us, it meant we were never necessary. Madeline finally leaned back. You weren't. Tears ran down Victoria's face, but she didn't sob. She didn't plead. She stood, turned to leave. As she reached the door, Madeline called out softly, Tell your story if you want to, Victoria. But don't ask to rewrite mine. That evening, Madeline visited a small community center in South Denver. No press, no staff, just 40 folding chairs and a chalkboard. She wrote 3 words, ruthless, rebuilt, resilient. When it was time to speak, she began simply, People ask how I made it without a family behind me. I didn't. I stopped waiting for them. A woman in the back raised her hand. What if they come back different? She asked. Madeline nodded thoughtfully. I'll let them tell their side, she said. But I've already told mine, and I won't rewrite it to make anyone else more comfortable. The room was quiet in the way only truth can make it. Later, as she slipped on her coat, she saw him, her father, Richard Carter, standing alone in the back. No press, no badge, no power. Just an aging man watching the daughter he'd erased become a voice that couldn't be silenced. He stepped forward slowly. I never understood you, he said quietly. Madeline stayed still. But today, I realized maybe I didn't have to. Maybe I just needed to see you. Really see you. Madeline didn't cry. She didn't speak. She simply bowed her head, a gesture full of peace, not surrender. Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft, quiet, final. If you've ever built a life from what they tried to destroy, type 4. You're not alone and your voice matters. The next morning, a package appeared on her desk. No name, no label, just one item inside, a sealed USB, and a note. There's more, and it goes deeper than your sister. The name Carter wasn't just built on pride, it was built on cover-ups.